From Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, and the home of hot chicken, it's the Rick Altizer Show. Sit back, buckle up. Rick will talk with the movers, shakers, and creators who put Christ in Christian entertainment. He's a man who's clear so the world can hear. Here's Rick Altizer.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's going to be a special day. Today we're going to talk about songwriting, the process of songwriting, and some of the challenges and fun stuff about it. And my guest today is someone that you might be familiar with. He's been on the show a few times. He's also one of my best friends on the planet. I'd like to introduce you to Steve Siler. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to be here with you.
Back, we just had some Mexican food.
Mm-hmm. We'll try to keep that to ourselves as we conduct the interview.
We don't want to share that with the audience. So Steve is a songwriter. He currently also heads up a ministry called Music for the Soul, where he's taking his songwriting abilities and writing songs. Tell us a little bit about Music for the Soul, kind of a three-sentence overview.
We use songs and stories to, quote-unquote, talk about the things that are hard for people to talk about, deep issues of pain, and we bring the hope and compassion of Christ to those issues through song.
And you can get more information about that by going to musicforthesoul.org.
Correct.
And, you've been writing songs now for what, about 800 years? How many, when did you start writing?
Well, this does not make me unusual, or I like to say this makes me as unique as a grain of sand on the beach. I saw the Beatles on television and said, I think I'll do that. And so my dad bought me a guitar, and I learned a few chords, and by the time I was 10, I already had an album's worth of songs. They were really bad songs, but
right.
Fisherman, The Shark Just Ate Up Dan, and so on. Thomas J. Brown is rotting in the ground. My very best friend, oh, why did it have to end so soon, but now he's dead. Stuff like that.
Like that. Great. Yeah. Well, you went on to become a staff writer here in Nashville. Mm-hmm. Wrote for a lot of a lot of Christian artists. As a matter of fact, tell me if I got this number right. I'm pulling this out of the air from my memory.
Okay.
31 number ones in the Christian charts?
Oh, for heaven's sakes, no. I think you're thinking about the top 10 singles. I had 45 of those.
Okay.
I had 9 number ones.
9 number ones, yeah. 45 top 10s.
Yeah.
Okay, not that you counted or anything.
Well, there was a time when that was important. I haven't really thought much about that in quite a long while, but yeah, it was important.
Dove Song of the Year winner,
yeah.
A lot of accolades and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the industry changed,
mm-hmm.
and it made it difficult for a songwriter who wrote Christian music to make a living. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I actually planned my exit before that, because I could kind of see which way the wind was blowing. So my last staff deal in Nashville was ended in 2003. And that was prior to the whole streaming thing. We were just talking about downloading and some file sharing then. But I really felt like I could see the writing on the wall that technology was changing and that the revenue streams were going to change. And I had been wanting to do the ministry of Music for the Soul for many, many years. In fact, when I signed my deal with Word, which was a 5-year deal, I went to my wife and said, I'm really thinking I might want to start the ministry. And she smiled at me and held up one finger and said, one more deal. So I did a 5-year deal at Word, and it was about 3.5 years into that deal that I went to her again and said, I think God's calling me to jump off the cliff. And she said, okay. So, when you're married, you want to do these things in agreement.
Yes.
That's what's healthy for a marriage, is to do these things in agreement. She's a very wise woman, and she was right. She was absolutely right.
So what do you like about songwriting?
Oh, gosh. Like isn't a strong enough word. I love songwriting. I love songs. I love creativity. I think that if we're created in the image of God, obviously God is the ultimate creator, so how can we not then be creative? I think everybody is creative, whether they know it or not. It doesn't always express itself in song. But I think we all need to find out how God has called us to create, because I think that's when we feel the closest to God. Certainly it is when I do. It sounds so egotistical to say, like, I feel like every song is a co-write with God. But for me and the people I write with, it starts with prayer and inviting God into the process. And so, it's actually a form of worship at that point, because you really are trying to honor God, to serve God's people with the content you're creating. And then the part that's the most fun that I didn't really count on, as a matter of fact, it was when I realized I was growing up. For the first several years of my career, quote unquote career, even call it a career is a little bit of a stretch, but I wanted to be, the next coming of Peter Frampton, right? So I was trying to be a rock star. And so I was writing all the songs by myself because, I'm a rock star. I don't need anybody. And, kind of banged my head against that wall for about 10 years, kept that carrot right there in front of my nose, had just enough success to not give up, but not enough to really get anywhere. And so, one day it occurred to me, maybe I should think about this collaboration thing. And then when I moved to Nashville and I signed my first staff deal, they were setting me up. I had 2 co-writes a day every day of the week for, in the first year I was here, I wrote 135 songs. Just 2 songs a day, every day. And the discipline of that, it sounds rigorous, but what it was getting in rooms with people who had the same passion I did. And so we're sharing ideas, we're creating. It was an environment where I always say, when you're co-writing, split everything equally. Don't quibble over percentages, because if you just open it up and say, whatever comes out of this room today is ours. We create this together. And we may use your idea, we may use mine, but something you say we don't use might make me think of something else. So no counting syllables, no counting lyrics, no saying who wrote the verse, who wrote the chord, none of that. So as soon as we did that, I found that what I was doing was I was making all these great friendships, because to get to a song that anybody needs to hear, you literally need to be willing to rip your chest open and put your heart out on the table and let people stomp around in it. Because otherwise you're just scratching the surface. So in that process of being vulnerable and open to people about deep stuff, to get to the good stuff in a song, what happens is you're fast-tracking friendship. Because I'm learning everything about you that matters, and you're learning everything about me that matters, and the more we write, the more that happens. Got to the point where literally almost every songwriting session would start with about 30 to 60 minutes of what's going on with your family. How are your kids? What's going on in your life? What can I pray about for you and your wife? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so now you've got these wonderful friendships, by the way, many of which endure to this day, even though I don't co-write with a lot of those people. So I think for me, the big surprise and the deepest joy of all has been the relationships that have emerged from songwriting.
How do you write 135 songs a year and open your heart up and rip out your heart and put it on a page? How do you do that on a regular basis? It's
discipline. It's like anything else. I would say that some of those songs, the chest was a little more wide open than others, especially when you're co-writing with new people, because sometimes you're just going with their idea, and at that point you're working on you're calling on your craft to deliver the idea that somebody else brought to the room, and maybe it's something that really tugs on your heart, and maybe it's not. But I feel like the songs, when I'd been in town a little bit longer, I would definitely pulled back on that. And then I'm looking to co-write with people that I know care deeply about what they're doing and aren't going to rush an idea, aren't just writing just to toss something out, but really are committed to creating something that's going to make a difference in somebody's life. So by the time I'd been a staff writer for 3 years, I'd say that number was down closer to 40 or 50.
Okay, so you're doing. Tell me about the difference between writing a song. When you're getting together, you're doing 2 songs a day. Mm-hmm. Okay, and when you first started out, you're writing the songs by yourself, and you're thinking over every word, and you let the words sit and percolate. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
A year
on a song. You'll have these songs sit there, and they take this time, and then you're cranking out 2 a day. Talk about the differences between those 2 different writing styles, some of the positives and negatives of both.
Well, what I would call a beginning songwriter or somebody who's just getting started might say that they wait for inspiration to strike. They have to have the right idea, whatever. And I had once somebody say to me, well, what if inspiration strikes and you're on the golf course? You need to sit down with the tyranny of the blank page every day. I remember going into a publisher's office, and I had my new demo with 6 songs. I was so proud. They were so cool and so great, and I just knew I'm going to get my big break now. And so he listened to the songs very politely, didn't interrupt at all. And when it was over, he turned to me and said, "How much do you write every day?" And I wasn't prepared for that question. And you know that moment where you're busted, your face already says, I don't have an answer for that. And now you're going to like fumfer around and try and find something and like, so you're going to make something up. And he didn't even let me finish my sentence. He interrupted and said, Steve, if you're not at the writing desk 10 hours a day, you don't really care about this. And that sounds extreme, but I got the message. And what I did was, I was working full time at A&M Records at the time out in Hollywood. I was in the merchandising department, and so I was doing my songwriting quote on the side. But what I did was I laid out a schedule whereby I wrote every single day when I got home, 2 hours a night. I wrote 8 hours on Saturday. The only day of the week that I did not write was Sunday. So I instituted my own self-discipline. The lady who was dating me at the time actually wound up marrying me. So that's astonishing that she put up with that, because I literally said, I can't see you today because I got to write. I mean, I was committed to getting that message and seeing what kind of difference it would make to write every day. And it was just woodshedding, good old-fashioned practice. And, you know, if you want to be a writer, the fact of the matter is that writers write. Writers do not wait for inspiration.
You're listening to the Rick Altizer Show. My guest today is songwriter Steve Siler, and we're talking about songwriting. And Steve also has a ministry where his songwriting now is used to help people with issues that they maybe might not want to talk about, very deep, serious issues. You can get more information about Steve and his ministry, Music for the Soul, by going to musicforthesoul.org. So I know Hemingway said, for every word you write, you need to have read 1,000.
Good quote.
So, you know, if I'm going to write a book, I need to have read 1,000 books before I write my first one. So how does that relate to songwriting? You know, and we kind of got going in this inspiration versus craft.
Yeah.
And talk to me about the craft of songwriting, and then how do you operate as a craftsman and still be inspired?
Well, you know, we were talking about inspiration before, and the fact is, if you sit down to write every day, then when inspiration strikes, you'll actually be there writing. So that's why it's important to write every day. But there's an expression that used to get tossed around when I was a staff writer that I actually like, and it was called filling the lake. A reservoir, if the water only goes out, it's going to dry up. It's the rain coming down off the mountains that fills the lake, that gives the reservoir something to offer to the people down the mountain. So I scheduled regular, what I would call fill the lake days. And I would grab up a bunch of devotionals and a bunch of reading material and some books and some paper and pencil. And I would go out into, you know, Edwin Warner Park or around Radnor Lake or somewhere out in a natural area where no phones, no office, nobody can find me. I'm by myself for that day. And I would just sit and pray and read and think and be still and write down the ideas that came to me. And I did that regularly, and it really worked. So at any given time, I had an idea page in my notebook with 30 or 40 song ideas that came from those Fill the Lake days, so that I never would go into any writing meeting blank. I might go into a writing meeting feeling like I really want to hear what somebody else has to say today because I'm tired of my own ideas. But there were always ideas in my book that I could toss at somebody. And to me, you know, that idea of filling the lake, always ingesting. I say to songwriters or any kind of writer, see a lot of movies, read a lot of books. Absolutely. Taking it, listen to a lot of songs. I mean, songwriters, listen to a lot of songs, you know, and listen to excellent stuff and listen to stuff that challenges you. Don't just listen to your taste. If you want to grow, you know, listen across the board, read across the board. All the Christian songwriting things I teach at, I always say, please don't just listen to Christian songwriters. There's some really good ones, but there's a lot of pablum out there too. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with listening to people like Sting or, you know, Randy Newman, who's an atheist, one of my favorite songwriters. For economy of lyric, he's the best in the business. You know, so, I mean, you can learn from people all across the board, and whether they believe in God or not, their gifts were given to them by God. So go ahead and listen to excellence in any genre. Excellence is what matters. Writing, movies, music, excellence always. Yeah,
there's a new movie coming out about a guy who discovers Bruce Springsteen. You know, I think it's taking place back in the 80s. And I think the name of the movie is called Blinded by the Light, but it's talking about how Bruce speaks to him and how those lyrics are his life. And so there's something about being able to write confessionally. And I don't know that Bruce that sits and writes 2 a day, but I don't know. He seems to be extremely prolific. So he's obviously developed some kind of exercise. I'd have to have him on the show. Yeah. Good luck with that.
The confessional piece, though, is interesting because I once read, I think it was Kenny Loggins, an interview where he said, write about what you care about, because if it's important to you, it's going to be important to somebody else. And I found that to be true. We are on this planet together, and lived experience is quite often shared experience. So if you write your truth, and the other thing is people can tell the authentic from the inauthentic every time, especially younger people. So if you're coming from a real place, it's going to resonate.
So today, I just got, this week, I got a check for music services for my Pandora plays. This is all of my albums. I think I've got 6 on Pandora, I think. For the first quarter, 2 cents.
Yeah.
Then I got my Amazon, and it was 43 cents.
Woo!
Okay, so those numbers are very different from what it used to be.
Oh, absolutely.
The streaming has made it to where songwriters really can't make much money anymore. They're not selling product. The streaming is cutting into. So a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this, who are interested in songwriting, the reality is they're probably just writing for themselves.
Well, the question is, are you writing because you love it, because you can't keep from doing it, because it feeds your soul, or are you doing it to make a living? I mean, I would have to, at this juncture, discourage anybody from considering songwriting as a career until the financial models get worked out. Will they eventually? Maybe. Who knows? Writers have always been on the low end of the totem pole, even during the salad days. You and I were very lucky to be a part of the salad days. But even then, there weren't a whole lot of people making a living as Christian music staff writers. That was never a huge number. I had to get about 35 songs a year recorded and have several of them be radio singles and a couple of them be hits to make what I would call an actual living wage. And there weren't a ton of people doing that ever.
No, handful.
Yeah, so I was blessed to be one of them. But I mean, I would say the reason to write songs, particularly Christian songs, is because you care about the themes that you're sharing and you want to touch people's lives. And there are all kinds of places you can sing and share those songs. If you want to be heard, you can be heard. If you want to be paid, that's another discussion.
So talk about writing, songwriting. And again, for those who just tuned in, I'm talking to Steve Siler. He's my guest today and good friend. And we're talking about songwriting. And, you can hear more about Steve, hear some amazing songs that he's written by going to musicforthesoul.org. Talk to me about how would you encourage someone who wants to write songs, who loves to write songs, but now they're looking at, I don't know how to make a living at this. And so then how do you navigate that and still continue to encourage them to write, to find this is an expression you need to continue to do?
Well, there's value in the writing, just in the writing itself. It's a journey of self-discovery. You're learning about yourself. You're learning about self-expression. If you love to sing, and you love to play an instrument, there's deep joy in that. As a matter of fact, I often feel like it was when I became a professional writer that I lost the joy of just singing to sing and just playing to play. There was a time when I just got together with my buds and we were in the garage and we were rocking and rolling and it was just fun. Nobody had to pay us. We just did it because it was fun. I can't remember the last time I just did it because it was fun. So there is that piece that when money gets involved, okay, now it's a business. And we could go on, we could have a whole other show about what the business does to your art. So art has value. Art should exist for the sake of art. And I would say that to anybody, regardless of whatever art form that they're in. But, I mean, there are lots of interesting ways that people are sharing their music. Of course, YouTube now has become where people, quote unquote, listen to music. Mm-hmm. I wrote a song called See the Music in 1993 about this very thing because I thought that the music video was the beginning of the death of people actually listening. Mm-hmm. I challenge your listeners, when was the last time you turned off your phone, put on the headphones, closed your eyes, and gave 3.5 or 4 minutes to a great song? Mm-hmm. It can be a life-changing experience. You can't do it with the earbuds in while you're flying a plane and watching television and doing your taxes. Mm-hmm. And music has become, to some extent, oral wallpaper in this culture. Yeah. And music hasn't lost its power, but we've lost our ability to concentrate on it. So I think that's a problem. Obviously, as somebody who believes in the power of a song is the only form of communication, because language speaks to the left hemisphere of the brain and melody speaks to the right hemisphere of the brain. And oh, by the way, we store our trauma in the right hemisphere of the brain. A song is the only method of communication that engages the whole brain to help you deal with that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it grieves me that people have pushed music sort of off to the background noise place. And, but that's the culture we're in right now. Just getting anybody's attention on anything, putting down the phone and really spending time with something as a one-on-one experience with any kind of art.
Right. It's a distracted culture. They're playing video games and listening to music. And so, I had the Afters on a couple weeks ago on the show, and they were telling me that they heard that Coldplay have decided they're not going to make albums anymore. They're just going to do singles because the Afters we're talking about, we've got 12 songs on our record. Mm-hmm. We've spent all this time. We spent 3 years making this record. We've our blood, sweat, and tears into every single song. Right. And we put all our heart and soul into it. And the record company's going to promote 2, maybe 3 of them. Right. And there's going to be 9 or 10 songs that no one's going to ever hear. Yeah. And so that's the frustration of today because people are just listening to playlists. They're not listening to an album anymore. Right.
So to some extent, you have a choice to make. You and I come from an era where an album had an arc, and the album itself told a story, and each song played a role in that storytelling. And Music for the Soul's albums do that. Mm-hmm. Our CDs, or whatever you want to call them. They do that. They move in an arc from trapped in the problem to the steps of healing to freedom in Christ. So you do need to hear them in context to get the full value of them. But our new release is a single song. What we're planning for October, it's one song, because we are facing the reality that what we want to do is touch people. And my feeling is if I can touch them with one song, perhaps they'll go to the website and see, well, what else is on here?
Yeah, well, in the next 2.5 minutes that we've got left here, tell me a little bit about how you got to Music for the Soul, from staff writer to what you're doing now. Just a quick, if you can do it in 2 minutes.
Well, actually, I was trying to have a successful pop career, and it was my first pop hit that made me realize that my life was not headed in the right direction. Because I heard it on the radio, and I felt nothing. And it was like, okay, this is supposed to be my moment of victory. I've worked for this all my life. Here it is, and it's just nothing. It's just nothing like I thought it was going to be. And so that caused me to seek out, God's heart for my life. What am I supposed to be doing? Because this isn't it. And a couple of weeks later, I got an invitation to write some songs for a project for children who'd been sexually abused. And that might sound like a really dark way out of the, ethos kind of thing. But for me, when I wrote those songs and I saw therapists using them to help heal people, I thought, okay, this matters. This feels like a God thing to me.
That's changing people's lives.
Right. And so from then on, I made a mission statement for my life, which was the music that I write will share the compassion and healing of Christ with people. And I got my first staff deal after that. But from then on, that was true north for me as a songwriter, was this is what I'm going to write about. And then the ministry grew out of my successful time as a CCM staff writer.
And a lot of your hits that you had in the Christian market had that heart.
They did.
And that's why they connected.
They did.
Because there was something deep and something real about them that people were connecting with. Mm-hmm. So it's more than just a nice zippy melody and a clever lyric. Mm-hmm. There was something deep about it that was touching, real. And so it's great, and you've done a great job with Music for the Soul.
Thank you.
You can find out more about what Steve's talking about, issues about people who've had abortions and how they have to deal with that. People who deal with maybe an elderly parent and they're caring for.
Eating disorders, suicide, grief, pornography addiction.
Yeah,
we've gone into the dark end of the pool.
It's there. And so, I highly recommend you go to musicforthesoul.org and check it out and just listen to it and see if, and two, also for just seeing how could I write a song that is issue oriented. I think you're like the guy for that. you're kind of the guy for people to go, okay, I want to learn how to write a song about an issue that's important, that's deep. How do you do that? And not sound like a slogan.
Right. And I would encourage people, if you're going to try to do that, you need to really sit with the material. You need to talk to people who've lived it. You need to do some research. You need to spend some time. You need to honor the people that you're seeking to serve with a song like that. You can't just, go off the cuff with that stuff.
And you can go to musicforthesoul.org to hear more about it. Steve, thank you so much for doing this again.
My pleasure, Rick.
What a great way to end a lunch, to go you and me and do this. It's awesome.
God bless.
Mm-hmm. If there's a show you've missed, you can go to my website, rickaltizer.com, and catch up. Or you can listen to my podcast in iTunes or wherever you hear your podcasts. Just search for The Rick Altizer Show. Altizer is spelled Altizer. I want to thank you for listening. Hey, would you tell a friend about this show and share the love? Be sure to check us out again next week as we discuss how we communicate the gospel through media to our culture. Let's be clear so the world can hear. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. Those who are in Christ.